Hello and welcome to the channel. Now I just want to start this one off by saying a massive thank you. Obviously this is the 1,000 subscriber special and that's a milestone that I never thought I'd reach. Especially not as quickly as we have done, considering it doesn't feel like 5 minutes since I was doing this for 500 subscribers. Really, I started this channel off and started posting more regularly just as a way to maybe make a bit more of a name for myself so that people might listen to my music when I release it, but I never expected it to take off quite like it has. So for every single one of you who has supported me thus far, a massive thank you. But today we're here to answer some questions which you guys have asked me, so let's get into the first one. What was your first gigging amp setup, please? Analog or digital multi-effects? So those of you who know me and know a bit of my background will know that actually I'm a bass player, and that's what I was for pretty much all of my past gigging. And so it was a bass setup rather than a guitar setup. But that generally was a jazz bass through a pedal board which consisted of a bass big muff and a GB7 graphic equalizer. And then that was going into a Fender Rumble 500. That setup's changed slightly, but I'm gigging a lot less now. In terms of the first guitar setup I had, well, my first guitar was an Ibanez Geo GSA 60, and I just borrowed my dad's amp because he plays also. But really my first proper setup that I ever did any real recording or anything with would have been my S2 PRS single cut semi-hollow and an Ignator tweaker. I'm definitely an analog sort of person and I don't really have a whole lot to do with digital multi-effects at all. For all of my recording and everything, I'm still using a tube amp or multiple tube amps depending on the tones I'm after. So the next question is, what is your best gigging experience or memory? Now that's a tough one because there are some great memories of being back in my limited time days. That was the band I was in, for those of you who don't know. But probably the best memories are from the couple of times that we played at the Cambridge Junction. If you're not familiar, it's the sort of the big venue in Cambridge, and I've seen plenty of great shows there, but so to play there was quite a surreal experience. But I think if I had to choose a favourite, it would probably be that one. Moving on to the next question, which is favourite shape or style of guitar. That's an easy answer. It's this guy right here. I'm a big fan of a Telly, and to be fair, single cuts in general, although I'm more of a Telly and a PRS single cut kind of guy than a Les Paul, and I probably would choose an SG over a Les Paul, but favourite shape or style of guitar is Telly T-style, without a doubt. The next question is, what has been your most enjoyable video to work on? Ignoring the stats, which video am I the happiest with? Now that's hard, especially ignoring stats, because being a musician and a YouTuber, there's definitely a bit of an ego boost attached to a video that does well. But there have been a few, especially recently, that have been really fun to work on. I loved doing the Hello Kitty guitar. That was really, really good fun. Just getting to do work on a guitar and go through the process of doing all the paint and stuff was really fun. And the £100 rigs, they are my most successful videos, but I do genuinely enjoy them because it's a good challenge for one, and it's meant that I've got to experience some bits of gear that I probably wouldn't have ever given a chance if I hadn't been doing those videos. So I think for me, yeah, it would either be the Hello Kitty video, just because that project was really good and I was extremely happy with how the guitar turned out in the end, or the £100 videos. And it is just a bit of a coincidence that those are some of the most successful videos that I've done. But maybe the fact that I enjoy them so much does contribute to why you guys like to watch them. I don't know. Moving on, the next question is, which £100 rig is your favourite? What are the advantages and disadvantages? So far obviously we've done two, but I'll let you into a little secret, there is more to come. But so the two that we've had so far were the Aria, the Super Fuzz, and the little Rage 158. And then we had the HSS Donna Strat, the Delay, and the Laney K35. Now choosing a favourite is really hard because they're kind of very different rigs. Obviously the little Rage combo and that fuzz pedal were such a killer combo, and so for sort of big heavy sort of hard rock riffs that was killer. But then I'm also a sucker for nice clean tones, which the Laney setup did really well. If I had to choose, I'd probably go for the first one, the Cash Converters, so the Rage 158 and the Super Fuzz, purely because I wasn't that impressed with the pedal that went with the Laney. Although I love the Laney amp and I am keeping that, I have also kept the PV and the Super Fuzz, whereas the pedal and the guitar from the eBay video are gone now. But I think both of them, for the price point that they were at, are phenomenally good rigs. Our next question is, what's the most expensive guitar you've played and was it worth the price tag? Now, I'm lucky that I have had the chance to play some quite expensive guitars. Some of you will have seen in some of my videos I do have a PRS Miles Kennedy, which comes with a hefty price tag. And those of you that know me will know that when I was younger, in my sort of late teens, as a summer job between school and college, I worked for PRS Guitars in their European distribution centre. So that also meant that I did get my hands on a fair few PRSs, and obviously PRS are known for being quite expensive. But so in terms of the most expensive guitar, I can't tell you for definite a specific one, but it will be some sort of high-end American PRS. Whether they're worth the price tag is a really tough one, because obviously they are phenomenal, really, really nice instruments. And I guess worth the price tag comes down to how much you sort of value money and whether you can afford to make that sort of a purchase. And also, I guess, whether you click with the instrument. Clearly, I don't really remember playing anything that stands out massively, so I don't think I really clicked with anything specifically. But then something like my Miles Kennedy I have really clicked with, so I probably would say it is worth the price tag. I mean, it's definitely a standout as being one of the nicer guitars that I own. And especially when you take into account that with guitars you get that law of diminishing return, meaning that especially at the higher price points, £100 difference makes a lot less difference than £100 does at say £400 or £500, because you can feel a difference, or for me personally at least, I could feel a difference in the quality when compared to something at say £1,500, £2,000. My only issue with really expensive guitars like that is they scare me a little bit in terms of taking them out. I wouldn't want to gig anything like that, so they do become just home studio tools. And so in some cases, depending on what sort of stuff you're doing or what I would be doing, then maybe I would say that a cheaper guitar would be more worth it. But I think whether it's worth its price tag is dependent on quite a few things. You personally, what you're going to be using it for, how precious you are about it, all of these things. But on the whole, of the expensive guitars I have played, I would probably say that yeah, they're worth it. Moving on, and to a question that's probably going to get me in trouble with someone and start debate in the comments, but it is, who is the most overrated and underrated guitarist? Now that's really tough. We'll start with underrated, and I know Ewan from our band Meliorism would like me to say him, but I'm not willing to give him that ego boost. When you say to me underrated guitarist, I think the first ones that come to mind would be people who are still very well regarded in the guitar world, but don't really get the recognition outside of that. So someone like Rabir Massad comes to mind, because although myself included, there are people who absolutely adore him and rightfully so think he's an amazing player. In guitar circles, outside of that, he doesn't really get a whole lot of recognition. So I'd be entitled to say someone like Rabir, or maybe a Guthrie Govan, or someone like that who is well revered in the guitar world, but in the more sort of mainstream and outside of the guitarist circles isn't a known name, you know. Now overrated, and this is the one that's going to spark some controversy and some debate in the comments for sure, but for me the two that come to mind when you say overrated guitarists are Slash and Kurt Cobain. Now before you start yelling at me in the comments, let me just try and justify this. Both of these guitarists obviously are huge names and have made an amazing career and are still very good at what they do. But for me, Slash's playing is kind of generic Guitar Hero playing, if you know what I mean. It's very much based on pentatonic licks, and you know, it's sort of, if you think of generic Guitar Hero playing, it's that. But then that's not necessarily a bad thing. Obviously it's an iconic sound. It's just, for me, it's kind of, there are other players who technically are way, way better and don't get the same level of recognition. And then with Kurt Cobain, bearing in mind that I am a big fan of Nirvana, I do love their stuff. For me, Kurt's playing is just very meh. As a songwriter, incredible. As a singer, he's got an iconic voice. But as a guitarist, he's fine. but a little bit sloppy, which to be fair does suit the music, but just my thinking of it is, say he was just one of the guitarists in a band and not the frontman of Nirvana, he probably wouldn't get the same level of recognition that he does get. I'll be interested to see what you all say about my takes down in the comments, but let's move on from that before I annoy anyone else and move on to the final question, which is, what is your biggest musical influence, favourite band or artist? Now that's again a really tough one, because I feel like my biggest musical influences aren't necessarily my favourite bands or artists, and it also depends on which project we're talking about. In terms of my favourite bands and artists, my absolute favourites are Biffy Clyro, Mallory Knox, Architects, Death. So a good mix of stuff. I wouldn't say that all of those are influences, especially across all of my projects. So in terms of influences, yes, things like Biffy Clyro for Lame Goat are a big influence, and Death for Meliorism is a big influence. But then in my solo music, it's kind of stuff that I am still very fond of, but it's stuff that I wouldn't necessarily consider to be my absolute favourite. So in my solo music, obviously there's a lot of post-rock influence in there. So stuff like Russian Circles is a fairly big influence, and then some more sort of emo, shoegaze, alternative rock stuff as well. So things like Title Fight, Super Heaven, maybe even a bit of things like Deftones. And then there's also sort of classical influence, things like Einaudi, who is my favourite pianist, and I draw a lot of inspiration from the way he plays, and with it being very pattern based. And then I guess there is some sort of more mainstream rock influence in there as well, things like Foo Fighters and some of Metallica's more sort of ballady stuff. I think really my solo stuff draws influence from a lot of different places and sort of lots of the different music that I love, which is one thing I really like about it, is that I feel like it does fairly well summarise sort of a lot of my different tastes. And then obviously Meliorism and Lame Goat show off more of my love for sort of the heavier stuff and the more sort of weird, odd time signature rock sort of stuff. So I know that's not a particularly definitive answer, but I hope that answers your question in some capacity anyway. But I think that brings us to the end, so that's all of the questions. Thank you to those of you who asked it, and again, a massive thank you to everyone who's supported the channel this far. Obviously, there's a lot more content to come, more £100 rigs as well as other interesting stuff, so stay tuned for that, and yeah, with a little bit of luck, hopefully I'll be seeing you for another one of these videos at 2,000 subscribers. But that's it for today, so one more time, a massive thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.